Hey guys, tonight we're diving into a world of rotting molars, splintered gums, and a smile that could clear a tavern. Not out of charm, but sheer halitosis. Let's just say, oral hygiene was not their strong suit. If this kind of oddly specific suffering interests you, feel free to like and subscribe. But only if you mean it. Tell me in the comments where you're watching from and what time it is. I love seeing who's out there. Now, dim the lights. Get cozy. Maybe turn on a fan for that nice medieval draft effect. Imagine clenching your teeth around a piece of salted pork so hard you nearly lose a molar. Now imagine doing that while squinting one eye shut, drawing a war bow the size of a ceiling beam, and trying not to dribble onto your wool tunic because your gums are bleeding again. Congratulations, you're a medieval English archer. Welcome to toothache hell, population, you. It's the year 1371, and if you're lucky, you're stationed in a windy marsh somewhere in southern England. If you're not lucky, you're in France, ankle-deep in mud, with a longbow in your calloused hands and the remains of a tooth you cracked on old bread lodged somewhere under your tongue. But we're getting ahead of ourselves. Let's begin at home, before the wars, before the tooth rot, and before the whole draw, loosing, dying business. You're 12 years old and have just been handed your very first bow. It's taller than you are and requires a technique that essentially involves rearranging your rib cage every time you draw it. They don't call it the war bow for nothing. This isn't archery club at the local park. This is years of training your body to become a semi-hinged meat catapult. By 13, you can hit a straw target from 60 paces. By 14, your left arm is longer than your right from over-pulling the string. By 15, your back looks like someone sewed planks into your skin. And by 16, your molars are already screaming. Why? Because you've started doing something called knocking, biting arrows to hold them steady while you reload. And your teeth are not thrilled about it. Here's a fun historical curiosity pill for you. English archers were trained to fire 10 to 12 arrows per minute. That's one shot every 5 seconds. Now, do that for several hours during a siege while clenching shafts between your molars, because your quiver's empty, and the guy next to you is already dead. You don't get a lunch break. You get splinters in your mouth. And the arrows? They're not smooth carbon fiber rods. These are rough, resin-coated shafts of ash or birch. You clamp that between your teeth a few dozen times, and it's less smile for the king, and more, oh no, another molar's gone. But the dental disasters don't stop there. Let's peek inside your rucksack, the medieval soldier's backpack of disappointment. Inside, a chunk of rock-hard bread. You'll need a hammer, or faith, some dried peas, edible if you soak them for 24 hours, which you won't, a small block of cheese that's more mold than dairy, and if you're really living the high life, a sliver of salted beef so tough it might qualify as a building material. Want to chew that? Good luck. The average archer's diet was a war crime against molars. Bread was often made with poorly sifted flour, full of grit from grinding stones. Yes, you're essentially brushing your teeth with sand every time you eat. You haven't tasted a soft meal in years. Your dental hygiene? Non-existent. Your toothbrush? Possibly your tunic sleeve if you're feeling fancy. Now breathe through your nose, because you can't through your mouth. Not because of etiquette, but because your gums are inflamed, and your teeth jiggle slightly when you chew. Don't worry, it's normal. Every archer you know is in the same state. That guy next to you? He's already missing 4 teeth and carries his spare arrowheads in the gap. Let's rewind a bit further, to training days. You spend hours practicing on the green, drawing your bow in the rain, the wind, and even when pigeons try to use your shoulder as a perch. Between practice and chores, your meals are basic: barley porridge, onions, and ale. And here's another historical gem. People didn't drink water because it could kill you faster than the French. So everyone, from 6-year-olds to elderly widows, drank ale. Not strong, but not good for your teeth either. Especially when it's mixed with medieval dental myths like rubbing your gums with honey to soothe pain. Great idea. Let's pour sugar on the rot. Oh, and speaking of sugar, if you're a royal archer or work in the household of a noble, you might get your hands on something sweet. Imported sugar, a rare treat, starts trickling into England around this time and absolutely annihilates teeth. Nobles could afford sugar, so they rotted their teeth with elegance. Archers? They rotted theirs with bad bread and boiled onions. Now you're 25. You've fought in 2 skirmishes, marched across half of France, and lost your first premolar to a hardened biscuit called hardtack, which is basically a medieval chew toy for humans. You're developing what physicians later describe, in Latin of course, as advanced oral ruin. Toothaches are a way of life. Want to get it fixed? There's no dentist. You have 3 options. 1. Ignore it and cry in private. 2. Drink until your vision blurs. 3. Ask the camp barber to rip it out with a pair of iron tongs and a short prayer. Spoiler, they almost always choose option 3. That's why camp followers, the merry band of merchants, cooks, and surgeons that travel behind the army, carry belts lined with pulled teeth, not as a trophy, as proof of payment. You hand over your coin, they hand you your tooth. Everyone goes home miserable. And here's the tragic twist. Despite it all, you're considered elite. Archers are valuable. They can change the tide of battle. They're paid better than most foot soldiers, often given land or pensions if they survive. But no one tells you the cost will be paid 1 tooth at a time. So you stand, your bow creaking in your hand, your jaw slightly askew, a mouthful of agony and pride. Because you, my friend, are an archer, feared by the French, adored by kings, and utterly defeated by bread. And yet, this is only the beginning. You're on the road with 4,000 other archers, sweating under a helmet that smells like boiled feet. The 100 Years' War is still going strong, which is a poetic way of saying that England and France are locked in a prolonged hissy fit that involves a lot of arrows, burned crops, and occasional sword-based decapitations. You, of course, are here for the arrows. Lots of them. The longbow, your lifelong partner in pain, hangs across your shoulder. It's 6 feet tall and carved from yew wood, a tree that ironically lives for over 1,000 years, unlike most people who use it. You carry 2 sheaves of arrows, 48 shafts, each fletched with goose feathers and tipped with iron. You also carry your misery, which weighs slightly more than your rations. Speaking of which, let's unpack the traveling menu. You're marching across Normandy with a food sack containing some smoked meat, if you're lucky. Dried peas, still dry. More of that charming grit-filled bread, and maybe a clump of cheese that's seen better centuries. No forks, no plates, just your fingers, your mouth, and your teeth. Or what remains of them. By now, your gums are inflamed from weeks of chewing rations designed by someone who hated joy. You don't chew so much as grind. Every meal feels like you're slowly sanding down your dental history. And yet, there's something worse. You wake up one morning and your jaw is swollen. Not just bad sleep on a lumpy sack swollen. We're talking medieval abscess. Hot, tender, and full of something the monks politely call humoral imbalance, and everyone else calls pus. Here's what you do. Nothing. Because unless you can find a monk with a knife, or a bored barber surgeon with low hygiene standards and a jar of honey wine, you're out of luck. The abscess will either pop and improve, or pop and infect. You'll know which by whether your face stops hurting, or your soul starts ascending. And if you think brushing would have helped, guess again. Toothpaste doesn't exist. Toothbrushes don't exist. You may have heard someone once recommend rinsing with vinegar, which, by the way, burns when it hits exposed nerves. But most archers just chew herbs like mint or fennel seeds and hope their breath stops smelling like decay. Now imagine that you're standing on a field in Gascony. The battle is about to begin. You're instructed to knock and draw, that is, bite an arrow from the bunch tucked into your belt, grip it between your already loose front teeth, and yank it into position with the practiced rhythm of a man pretending not to be in unbearable pain. You fire once, then again, and again, 10 times a minute, for half an hour. Do you know what that does to your jaw? The pressure alone has your temporomandibular joint sounding like a medieval wheelbarrow full of loose iron. Your back screams, your teeth rattle, your cheeks sting from the snap of the bowstring. And still, you keep firing. Because here's a depressing detail. Archers weren't just specialists. They were ammunition. You were there to die last, after killing as many as possible first. Not because anyone thought you were special, but because bows were cheaper than cavalry. And if you're injured, especially in the mouth, oh boy, an arrow to the leg might get you a splint. A sword swipe across your cheek? They'll sew it shut with catgut and optimism. But a shattered tooth or cracked jaw? Suck on some cloth, they say. Try not to scream too loud. You do scream, though. That night, quietly, under a thin blanket, cheek puffed up like a poisoned turnip, surrounded by other men who are too tired to care. They've all been there. Half of them have holes in their mouths where teeth used to be. They don't sleep much either. And speaking of sleeping, let's talk camp life. You don't get a tent. You don't even get a bed. You sleep under makeshift canvas, sometimes a damp woolen cloak, with the nearest pig for warmth and a rock as a pillow. Hygiene is theoretical. You've bathed twice since leaving England. Once when it rained and once when you fell into a swamp. Fleas are a constant. Lice? Guaranteed. Gum infection? Practically a badge of honor. Now, let's take a brief detour into medicine. A medieval tour, of course. If you report to the surgeon with a toothache, you'll be examined under a tarp with the same iron tongs they used to remove an arrowhead from a horse earlier. You'll sit on a log, clench your cloak, and listen as they casually debate whether to yank it, lance it, or apply caustic oil. That's right, hot oil. Directly onto the nerve. You don't get anesthesia. You get ale. Then you get a stick to bite. Then you get a story to tell your great-grandchildren, if you live that long and still have any teeth to speak through. And here's the grand irony. While you're rotting in the gums, nobles are busy rotting theirs with sugar. Yes, by the late 1300s, sugar is trickling in from the Mediterranean. It's rare, expensive, and absolutely devastating to the teeth. Rich lords used it in preserves and sweet pastries. Their teeth blackened, fell out, and a few aristocrats even painted their remaining teeth to make it seem fashionable. Tooth loss as a status symbol. That's right, you're dying of infection, and someone else is bragging about their decorative dental decay. You don't care, of course. You'd swap your mouth for a donkey's if it meant chewing without pain. But you soldier on. Because in this war, in this life, There's no retirement plan. Only the next battle, the next march, the next meal of misery, and a slow grind toward whatever grave waits for you. Your bow may be straight, but your teeth never stood a chance. You've survived poor rations, battlefield abscesses, and the horror that is medieval dentistry. But now, we move deeper, to peacetime life, archery tournaments, and the joyous experience of slowly chewing your own dignity in front of an audience. Because even off the battlefield, archers couldn't escape one thing. Their teeth were still losing the war. It's summer now, not that it makes much difference to your mouth. Your joints still ache, your bow still creaks, and your gums are still redder than a bishop's robes. But for once, you're not standing ankle-deep in French mud. You're home, on English soil, in a lovely market town that smells faintly of roasting mutton and old socks. Why? Because it's Sunday, and the local lord has sponsored a grand archery contest. Prizes include a few silver pennies, bragging rights, and possibly a roast goose if the cook's in a generous mood. The whole village is out. Peasants, merchants, even that one guy who only comes down from the hills to glare at children and eat raw onions. You're an honored guest, a returning veteran. Everyone expects you to win. After all, you've shot arrows through armor, picked off knights from trees, and bitten more arrow shafts than actual meals. And that, dear listener, is where the problem begins. Because during these contests, archers often kept extra arrows between their teeth. For speed, for flair, and let's be honest, for the show. It was the 14th century version of spinning a revolver before shooting. Impressive, dangerous, completely unnecessary, and absolutely horrific for your dental health. You wedge 3 arrows between your molars, purely for theatrics, and try to look menacing. Instead, you just look like a man trying not to drool. One of them slips and taps a nerve. You blink. The pain radiates into your ear. Spectators clap. You taste blood. But the show must go on. You draw your bow. You fire. You win, of course. And then you quietly spit into your hand and find a little white chunk that used to be part of a tooth. No one notices. You wipe it on your tunic and pretend it's a breadcrumb. Smile for the crowd. No teeth? No problem. Just purse your lips like you're contemplating the mysteries of existence, or suppressing the urge to scream. Later, while sipping a warm pint of small beer and gnawing on celebratory beef that could double as roofing material, you start to realize something. You're only 30, but your mouth feels 90. In a world where life expectancy hovers somewhere between "please, not today" and surprisingly not dead, 30 isn't young. But it's not ancient either. And yet, you've got gums like a prize-winning cow's and breath that could melt pewter. The village healer once tried to diagnose you by sniffing your exhale. She immediately declared you cursed and walked into a river. It doesn't help that, during peacetime, your diet doesn't improve much. Bread is still full of grit. Meat is still salted hard enough to fossilize. And even the rare treat, honeyed oat cakes or dried fruit, wreak havoc on your enamel. Dried figs, nature's little dental wrecking balls. And here comes another delightful medieval twist. No one expects you to fix it. Rotting teeth, normal. Pain when you chew, normal. Gums that bleed when you look at a plum too hard, perfectly normal. The whole village knows your teeth are a wreck, and they accept it with the same resigned shrugs they reserve for spoiled turnips or sudden lightning-based church fires. But you start to notice things, small things, like the fact that your speech is slurred when it rains, Or that you instinctively chew on only one side of your mouth, the way old dogs do when they're hiding a sore tooth. Or that every time you laugh too hard, your jaw clicks in protest, like a rusty drawbridge. And the ladies? They still flirt, in the subtle way people do when they're not sure if you're smiling or just recovering from facial paralysis. One of them, Agnes the baker's niece, offers you a tart. You bite down and feel a cold, sharp shock. That wasn't the fruit. That was an exposed nerve. You thank her through clenched lips, swallow the pain, and excuse yourself politely so you can go scream behind a haystack. Now, let's rewind a moment. Because maybe you're wondering, did anyone in medieval England actually try to fix this mess? Oh yes, with absolutely horrifying results. There were, in theory, remedies. You could try herbal poultices made of sage, vinegar, or even crushed mint. They smelled nice and made you feel like you were doing something useful. But they didn't work. Not really. They just gave your infected molar a chance to marinate in herbs before it tried to kill you from the inside. Then there were tooth powders, ground up bones, ashes, or salt rubbed onto the teeth with a rag. These were less about cleaning and more about sandblasting. It was like using gravel as toothpaste. The result? Temporarily cleaner teeth and permanently shredded enamel. Some old wives swore by onion poultices for gum pain. Others used burnt bread crusts, mashed with honey, applied to sore teeth. One particularly bold theory involved holding a warm hedgehog next to your cheek. For balance. So, no one knows if it worked. The hedgehogs refused to comment. And when all else failed, you visited the tooth drawer. Not a dentist, not even a barber surgeon. Just a local man with strong arms, questionable hygiene, and a pair of tongs that may or may not have been previously used on pigs. He'd remove the offending tooth with all the gentleness of a man squashing walnuts. Pain? Yes. Blood? Absolutely. Risk of infection? Practically guaranteed. You never went back. Once was enough, but you were lucky, sort of. Some archers lived into their 40s with only 6 teeth left, all of them crooked and stained and clinging on like desperate tenants in a condemned building. Others died younger, not from arrows, but from sepsis, jawbone infections, or starvation when chewing became physically impossible. And through it all, the bow remained your companion. You still train, still draw, still bite your arrows, even though every part of your face begs you to stop. But you won't, because this is who you are. An archer, a survivor, a man whose teeth tell the story of every mile, every meal, and every battle. And deep down, you suspect the worst is yet to come. It's 1375. You've just returned from a tournament where a meat pie cracked your last intact premolar, and now you're barely recovered when a herald rolls into your village. Trumpet blaring, robes flapping, and a scroll in hand like he's delivering cake. Spoiler, it's not cake. He's here to remind every able-bodied archer that the king still has enemies. And wouldn't you know it, those enemies are throwing parties again on the coast of Brittany. You, of course, are volunteered. So here we go again. Another campaign. Another ocean crossing. Another few months of marching, looting, dodging arrows, and gnawing on biscuits that have the texture of fossilized regret. You try to protest. Your gums are infected. Your jaw aches like someone cursed your face. But the local lord waves it off. You've still got a bow arm, haven't you? Yes, and barely enough teeth to bite into the leather strap of your gear. The voyage is predictably awful. You're stuffed on a ship with 100 other men and roughly 3 functioning teeth between you. The sea air does little to ease the pain. Salt water doesn't exactly clean infected gums. If anything, it just stings them into a fresh round of throbbing. To pass the time, you chew salted fish and listen to your bunkmate cough violently into the shared soup bucket. His breath smells like something already dead. You realize it's familiar, because your breath smells the same. A quick aside, in case you're wondering, breath in medieval Europe wasn't just bad, it was weaponized. There are historical records of people describing someone's breath as corpse wind. That's not an insult, that's an observation. Tooth decay, mouth ulcers, and open gum wounds create a delightful scent profile best described as fermented despair. You could clear a tavern just by yawning. Back to the ship. You reach the French coast, disembark, and begin the slog inland, a cheerful march through enemy territory with a toothache that feels like divine punishment. You try eating bread. It splits your lip. You try sipping wine. It burns like liquid fire. You try chewing with your back molars, only to remember they were removed in 1373 after an unfortunate accident involving boiled boar and poor judgment. Eventually, you give up and start swallowing food half-chewed like a medieval pelican. And then you get injured. Not dramatically. No noble sword duel or arrow to the heart moment. No, you take a glancing blow to the chin from a loose stirrup during a cavalry shuffle. It knocks something loose inside your jaw. Something important. You think it's just swelling. Turns out it's your mandible and it's cracked. The pain is unexplainable, like someone installed a wasp's nest behind your teeth. Your face swells. Your speech slurs. Your comrades think you've had a stroke. The captain recommends cauterizing it with a red-hot poker. You fake sleep until they leave. In the absence of proper care, or even improper care, your body does what it can, inflames, infects, and slowly decides to do away with certain functions, like chewing or smiling. But you keep marching, because no one stops, especially not for teeth. And then, mercifully, the campaign ends. You've won, somehow. The enemy retreated. Your side looted 3 barns and a disappointing monastery. And now you get to sail back home, with one eye half shut from the swelling, and a smile that looks like someone rearranged your face with a hammer. When you return, no one asks how your health is. They ask how many men you killed, how many arrows you fired, whether you saw the king. You nod and grunt and sip warm ale through the corner of your mouth. And then, for the first time in your adult life, you do something drastic. You visit the apothecary. This is not a doctor. This is a man who sells powders, unguents, and mysterious pastes in jars with Latin names and questionable smells. He examines your face, mutters something about corrupted black bile, and offers you a tincture made from crushed snails and vinegar. You ask what it does. He says it draws out infection. You ask what else it does. He says, sometimes nothing. You buy it anyway, because you're desperate. You try the tincture. It burns your gums. It burns your tongue. It does not draw out anything except tears. You scream into a chicken feather and consider your life choices. But wait, there's more. A local friar hears of your pain and recommends spiritual healing. He asks if you've confessed. You say yes. He asks if you've stolen anything. You say only hearts. He doesn't laugh. He offers to pray over your jaw. You accept. The next morning, it's slightly less swollen. Now, was it the prayer? The vinegar snail sauce? The placebo effect? Or sheer bodily exhaustion? You'll never know, but you take the win. For a while, you survive on soup, mashed turnips, and despair. You learn to smile with your eyes. You learn to chew like a squirrel. Small bites, many pauses, occasional wincing. You're a master of pretending things taste better than they do. And you realize something else. It's not just the archers. Everyone in the village, Smiths, Millers, Carters, even the baker's baby-faced apprentice, has terrible teeth. Gaps, stains, wobbly grins. You're all falling apart from the mouth downward. But no one talks about it, because it's normal, expected, accepted. There is no standard of beauty, no sparkling smiles, no orthodontal ambitions. You are not ugly. You are typical. And in a strange, tragic way, that's comforting. Still, at night, when the pain wakes you, and you press a cool cloth to your jaw and count the teeth you've lost, 10 now, maybe more, you wonder what it would have been like to have all of them, to bite into bread without bleeding, to kiss someone without apology, to smile and mean it. But that is not your story. You are an archer, a survivor, a ghost of war and wood and ache. And tomorrow, you pick up your bow again, because your teeth may fail you, but your duty never will. You're 50 years old. That doesn't sound impressive now, but in 14th century England, you might as well be a walking relic. The villagers call you Old Will. Children point and ask if you remember the plague. You do. In fact, you remember 3 of them. You're like a local ghost who forgot how to die. You still own your bow, though you no longer shoot. Your shoulders are too tight, your fingers too stiff, and your breath catches if you walk up more than one hill or finish your soup too quickly. You keep the bow above your hearth, mounted like a trophy or a warning. It watches over you like an old friend, the kind who once helped you win a war and also ruined your face. Because what's left of your teeth could be counted on one hand. And even then, you'd still have fingers left over. At this point, chewing is less about nourishment and more about ritual. Your meals are simple: soft pottage, boiled greens, stewed apples. The bread is soaked in ale before eating. Not because it tastes better that way, but because otherwise it's liable to break your jaw, like it's 1368 again. Every bite is a negotiation. You chew carefully, slowly, like an old barn door creaking open in a storm. Some days you pretend it tastes like goose. Most days it tastes like surrender. Your gums are a memory of pain. They no longer swell. They simply recede like the tide, revealing the bare, yellowed stumps of what once passed for molars. Occasionally, you catch your reflection in a puddle or a polished bowl. You see your crooked smile, your collapsed cheeks, your half-toothed grin. You do not flinch, because this is the face of someone who lived. And still, there's pride, because despite the misery, you were someone once. Not a lord, not a knight, but an archer, one of England's best. A man who could split a helmet from 200 paces, who stood firm at Crécy, who buried arrows into enemies so thick they blotted out the sky. Now you tell stories. Children gather around your stool outside the alehouse, breath held, eyes wide. You regale them with tales of French campaigns and arrow storms, and how you once downed a knight by shooting his horse out from under him. They gasp. They cheer. They ask, "Did it hurt?" You nod and say, "The horse? No. My jaw? Every single day." They laugh. You don't. And yet, you're not bitter. Not really. You've seen what happened to the others. The ones who didn't come back. The ones who came back in worse shape. A leg missing. An eye. They're minds. You? You just lost your teeth. That's practically a blessing. The local priest often reminds the villagers that heaven is a place of peace and restoration, that the body will be made whole. You once asked, even the teeth? He frowned. Well, probably. You asked again, just to be sure. He changed the subject. Still, it gives you hope. Because here's the thing they never write in the chronicles. Archers didn't fear death. They feared rotting to death, slowly, from within. They feared the jaw infection that crept into the brain, the ulcer that turned septic, the breath so foul even the saints turned away. Dying in battle was clean, but dying from a cracked molar that festered into fever? That was how you were forgotten. You spend your twilight years sitting by the hearth, carving wood with a dull knife and humming songs you barely remember. Sometimes you suck honey through a cloth, not for pleasure, but for comfort. It coats your mouth and soothes your gums. A medieval lollipop for the toothless warrior. And when winter comes, and it always does, you feel it in your jaw before anywhere else. That strange, deep cold that settles into the bone where a tooth used to be. No fire can touch it. No cloth can warm it. It's not just cold. It's memory. Pain with a name. But even then, you do not complain. Because to complain would be to forget. Forget the fields of battle, the thunder of hooves, the song of bowstrings. Forget the thrill of a perfect shot. That 1 second where everything lined up and the world held its breath. Forget the pride of standing among brothers, mouths full of splinters and pain, hearts full of fire. Forget what it meant to be feared. You keep your silence. You keep your stories. You keep your dignity. Even as your jaw creaks, your breath rasps, and your dinner looks more like oatmeal than food. Because, in the end, the rot didn't win. You did. So now, dear listener, as you lie there under your warm modern blankets, with a full set of teeth and toothpaste that doesn't contain crushed bone or ashes, remember old Will. Remember the archer. Not for the wars he fought, not for the arrows he loosed, but for the quiet battle he waged every day with a mouthful of ruin and the unspoken defiance of a man who refused to stop smiling, no matter how crooked it got. Good night, and brush your teeth. The second history is why you wouldn't last a day as a medieval archer. Imagine waking up with half your body frozen and the other half trying to crawl away from your own stench. Congratulations, you're a medieval archer now. It's the year 1348, and no, that number won't come with any perks like indoor plumbing or job security. What it will come with is the 100 Years' War, a charming little dispute between England and France that's been dragging on so long even the kings forget why they're mad. You're just one of the lucky peasants who's been handed a longbow, some arrows, and the vague suggestion that your country needs you. You start your day the way every noble warrior dreams, curled up on a pile of straw that smells suspiciously like wet dog and fermented onions. There's no mattress. There's no privacy. Your feet are sticking out from under a blanket that's mostly holes. Your knees hurt. Your teeth ache. You're 22, which in medieval archer years is basically retirement age. Outside, the frost is doing its daily inspection of every gap in the tent. And guess what? It found a few. The wind slips in like a gossiping ant, uninvited, cold, and very interested in your business. You sit up slowly, bones popping like firewood. The camp is quiet for now, but that won't last. Your bow, the famed English longbow, mighty terror of French knights, lies next to you like a loyal dog, except it's made of you, not loyalty, and you have to string it yourself before your fingers go numb. You fumble with the sinew cord, hands trembling from the cold and last night's dinner, which was mostly beans and regrets. A little historical curiosity pill for you. That longbow? It takes years to master. Not weeks, not a brisk training weekend. Literal years of daily practice just to pull the thing back without it snapping your spine in two. Archers start training at age 6. They grow into the bow like tree roots grow into stone. You've had yours for about 6 months, and already your shoulder is plotting its exit strategy. You manage to string it after 3 tries, 2 curses, and a whispered apology to Saint Sebastian, the patron saint of archers and also of getting shot a lot. Comforting. The bow creaks. Your back creaks. Everything creaks. Now it's time for breakfast. Spoiler. It's terrible. You shuffle over to the fire pit, where something vaguely porridge-like simmers in a pot that hasn't been cleaned since King Edward's last mood swing. One of your fellow archers, Osric, ladles you a bowlful with the enthusiasm of a man who's seen too much oat-based despair. "Mind the weevils," he mutters. "You don't mind. Weevils are protein. The porridge tastes like ash, regret, and the damp corner of a root cellar. You eat every bite. Why? Because you'll be on the march soon, and no one wants to collapse from hunger in front of the cavalry. They never let you forget it. Now that your stomach is only mildly revolting, it's time to suit up. If you can call it that. You don't have armor. That's for knights. You're a peasant with a bow and a prayer. What you do have is a battered leather jerkin, a woolen cloak with holes in it the size of France's ego, and a pair of hose that haven't seen a wash since Pentecost. Your boots are stiff, cracked, and perpetually wet. You've developed a close, if hostile, relationship with trench foot. And your hands? Calloused, cracked, and permanently stained with bowstring wax and animal grease. You wrap them in strips of linen before pulling on your archery gloves. 3 fingers only. The rest of your hand will just have to fend for itself. The commander blows a horn. Time to line up. You and 200 other archers shuffle into formation, looking like a parade of moldy scarecrows. A knight rides by and glances at you the way you glance at expired cheese, with suspicion and mild pity. You're not his concern. You're a tool, a meat machine that flings death at enemies for 12 pence a day, if you're lucky and not dead. Training drills begin. You knock an arrow, draw the bow, and, oh yes, here it comes. Your back screams like a banshee who stubbed her toe. Drawing a longbow is no joke. It takes around 160 pounds of force. That's more than twice what modern gym bros bench press between selfies. You hold the draw for 3 seconds, enough to aim, curse your existence, and release. Thwap! The arrow thuds into the target. Kind of. You hit the edge of the straw dummy, which is better than yesterday's shot that sailed into the camp kitchen. Osric hits dead center. Again. You're starting to suspect he's made a deal with the devil, or at least someone who knows how to aim. By mid-morning, your arms feel like jelly, and your fingers have gone full rebellion. You can't feel your thumbs. You definitely can't feel your soul. You down some stale beer from a skin flask and pretend it's helping. It isn't. But water is worse. You don't drink the river. You apologize to it and walk away. And the day's just getting started. You're told the French are nearby. Not attacking, just lurking. The military version of loitering. So the order comes to move. March formation. Bows slung. Arrows bundled in canvas wraps and slung across your back like a sad, spiky backpack. You trudge through the mud. It clings to your boots like regret. Every step is an effort. Your bow bounces against your shoulder, the arrows poke your neck, and Osric won't stop humming some off-key song about a tavern maid and a chicken. After a few miles, your legs are jelly, your hands are frozen, and your heart is heavy. You start to wonder, again, why you ever agreed to this. Why not stay in your village and become a thatcher or a turnip thief? And then you remember, because the Lord conscripted you. You didn't choose this life. It chose you, like a bear trap chooses a rabbit. Ahead, the sky darkens. Thunder? No. Hoofbeats. French knights. Your commander yells for everyone to prepare. And you do, hands trembling, bow ready, breath shallow. Because whatever happens next, it's going to be ugly. And this is only the first skirmish of the day. There's something uniquely unsettling about hearing hundreds of hooves thundering toward you when you have nothing but a wooden stick and some sharp twigs. It's a sound that bypasses your ears and goes straight to your bladder. And just like that, you realize why medieval soldiers didn't wear pants with tight waistbands. You're standing in a freshly trampled field somewhere in northern France. The exact location doesn't matter. It's either going to be famous in a ballad or forgotten entirely, depending on how many of you survive. Spoiler: probably the second one. The longbow in your hand feels heavier now, like it knows what's coming and would very much like to be someone else's problem. You glance to your left. Osric's already drawn his arrow, jaw clenched, eyes narrowed. To your right is a lad barely out of childhood, shaking like a leaf in a thunderstorm. His name is Timothy. He joined last week. He still thinks the arrows have names. You'll miss him. The enemy crests the hill. Knights in gleaming armor, shields painted with lions, dragons, and family crests, designed mostly to say, "I'm very rich," and probably terrible at empathy. Their horses are enormous, more muscle than horse, more threat than transportation. And they're galloping straight toward you. Now here's the thing. Archers in medieval warfare were the equivalent of disposable razors, sharp, dangerous, useful, but not built to last. You weren't meant to fight up close. That's not your job. Your job is to stand way over here and turn the charging enemy into angry porcupines before they can get close enough to introduce their lances to your pancreas. Loose! The command rings out, and you draw your bow with everything your poor, overworked body has left. The familiar pain flares across your shoulder, like someone's yanking on a cord tied to your spine. You release. The arrow flies, clean, fast, deadly. Somewhere in the distance, a knight flinches, but the line keeps coming. You reach for another arrow. Draw. Loose. Again and again. Your arms are shaking, your fingers going numb, your breathing shallow. There's no elegance to it. You're just a sweaty, panicked meat machine firing pointy sticks and praying someone else notices. Then it happens. The first line of knights hits the hidden stakes. Ah yes, the cheval de frise, charming wooden spikes jammed into the ground at an angle. You set them up earlier, half buried beneath brush and hopes. Now they spring into action like very angry tree roots. Horses scream. A knight is flung like a catapulted ham. One particularly unlucky noble flips completely over his saddle and lands headfirst into the mud, with a sound that says, "No inheritance for you." A brief cheer erupts from your line, quickly cut short by the second wave crashing in. Arrows fly. Metal clangs. Somewhere, someone is definitely on fire. You duck instinctively. Not because you were targeted, no one's aiming that precisely, but because instinct says, if the air starts hissing, you get lower than the guy next to you. You hit the ground just in time to avoid a French arrow that sails past and embeds itself into the shoulder of poor Timothy. He stares at you, mouth open, eyes wide. Then he topples over like a badly made puppet. You feel nothing for a moment. Then you feel everything, the stench of sweat, blood, and churned-up soil, the screaming, distant and close, the shouts of commanders desperately trying to impose order on chaos, the thunder of hoofbeats, the unmistakable crack of ribs that do not belong to you. Yet, another volley is called. You rise, you fire, you drop again. The arrows are running low. Your strength is gone. And now the cavalry is too close. Time to run? Oh no. Now it's time to draw your secondary weapon, the short sword. Or as you like to call it, the thing I'm going to die holding. It's not sharp. It's not balanced. It's more of a glorified crowbar with identity issues. But it's all you've got as a dismounted French knight lumbers toward you like an ironclad refrigerator with a vendetta. You raise the sword. You shout something that sounds like bravery. It's actually just panic. You swipe once. He blocks easily. You try again. He kicks you square in the chest, sending you sprawling into the mud. You lie there, gasping, sword gone, ears ringing. The knight doesn't finish you off. Not out of mercy. He's already moved on to someone who still looks like a threat. You crawl toward your bow, half buried in mud. Your shoulder is screaming. You ignore it. You grab one last arrow. One shot left. You rise to your knees. Aim. And stop! Hold! They're retreating! The words echo across the field like a miracle wrapped in shouting. The French, or at least the chunk of them in your immediate area, are pulling back. Their knights, battered and bleeding, limp away on horses that now look considerably less smug. The battle is over, for today. You collapse. The field is littered with bodies, arrows, blood. One chicken, don't ask. Osric walks past you. You all right? He grunts. You nod. You lie. You stare at the sky and realize you can't feel your fingers. Again. Later, you'll strip off your gear and see the bruises blossoming like medieval tattoos. You'll eat something vaguely edible. You'll bury Timothy with no ceremony, because there's no time. And when night falls, you'll huddle near the fire, cradling your useless arm, and wonder how many more days like this you can survive. You'll think about home, the village, the hearth, your sister's awful singing, and then you'll remember, even if you wanted to leave, you can't. You're bound by law, duty, and the fact that desertion earns you a very public and very permanent goodbye. You close your eyes. Tomorrow is another march, another fight. Another reason you wouldn't last a day in this life. If it weren't for the fact that no one's giving you a choice. If you've ever been on a long walk and thought, wow, my feet are sore, allow me to introduce you to the medieval military concept of marching, which is less a walk and more an endurance trial designed by someone with a personal vendetta against knees. Welcome to the next lovely chapter of your short, miserable career as an archer. It's dawn. Again. Which means two things. One, you're awake. And two, you really wish you weren't. The sky is gray. The ground is gray. Your mood is somewhere between murderous and emotionally hollow. You've barely slept, because your straw bedding had the unique distinction of containing more rocks than straw. Breakfast? Ah, yes. Nothing warms the soul like cold porridge with a garnish of weevils and despair. There's a chunk of bread, too, though calling it bread is generous. It's a weapon disguised as food, hard enough to qualify as battlefield equipment. Your orders today are simple. March. Where to? Excellent question. Nobody knows. Not you. Not your captain. Possibly not even your commander. Somewhere strategic, they mutter. You suspect this means wherever the carts didn't get stuck in the mud last time. So you pack your gear, bow, quiver, sword, which you've forgiven for its betrayal yesterday, and your single, increasingly offensive wool cloak. You sling it all onto your aching body, stretch your legs, and prepare to shuffle forward with 3,000 of your closest, equally miserable companions. The march begins. Now let's clarify something. Medieval roads are not roads. They are suggestions. Most of the time, you're walking through mud thick enough to suck the shoes right off your feet, assuming you even have shoes, which is optimistic in your tax bracket. More than a few archers are already barefoot, their feet resembling old turnips with a vendetta. And that's just the topography. Now factor in the blisters. Your boots, handcrafted by someone with no concept of comfort or arch support, are slowly sawing through your heels. Each step is an act of defiance. Your toes are damp. Permanently. You could put your sock near the fire for an hour, and it would still squish. You begin to suspect your left foot might actually be fermenting. But no one stops, not unless they want a quick introduction to the back of the captain's staff. If you fall behind, you're not resting. You're deserting. And if there's one thing medieval commanders hate more than the French, it's desertion. So on you go. Miles pass. The countryside rolls by in shades of brown and miserable. Sheep stare at you like they've seen this movie before and know how it ends. You pass through a village that looks like it was built entirely out of leftover regret. A few children wave. One throws a turnip. You wave back, just in case the turnip comes with a moral lesson later. Around noon, there's a break. Rest is a generous term. You collapse in a ditch and chew the rest of your bread. Someone hands you a piece of salted pork that tastes like an old shoe, but you eat it anyway. Calories are calories, and you're burning them faster than your will to live. Osric, ever the optimist, starts rubbing pig fat onto his boots. Keeps out the wet, he says. He offers you some. You hesitate, then nod. Because if your dignity didn't survive yesterday's battle, it's definitely not going to make it through this swamp march. Another historical curiosity pill: archers sometimes urinated on their bowstrings to keep them supple in wet weather. No, really. Welcome to the kind of survival wisdom they don't teach in modern boot camps. And yes, you'll probably be doing that later. Just don't make eye contact with anyone while you do it. The march resumes. Afternoon bleeds into evening. Your body has entered what scholars might call complete disassociation. Your legs are moving, but your brain has taken a long holiday somewhere warm and imaginary. You pass another village. This one's deserted. The windows shuttered. The air heavy with smoke and suspicion. Rumors of plague? Or maybe the last army through wasn't as polite about leaving. As night falls, the camp is finally set. Now, setting camp is a very noble phrase. What actually happens is this. You drop wherever you stop, dig a trench if you're feeling fancy, and pray it doesn't rain. You get a scrap of canvas, a rock for a pillow, and a spot just far enough from the latrine trench to not wake up questioning your life choices. Again, dinner is stew. Technically, it's hot water with mystery bits. You don't ask what the bits are. You eat them, then drink your small beer. Because again, water is the leading cause of death in this era, followed closely by sharp things and childbirth. You try to check your feet, but it's too dark. You'll discover tomorrow whether you still have toes or just sad, stubby reminders. You rewrap your bowstring, bank the campfire, and lie back under the stars. And here, somehow, comes the strange part. It's quiet. A real quiet. No screaming. No charging horses. No arrows whistling past your head. Just the soft crackle of fire, the snoring of exhausted men, and the distant sound of an owl wondering why so many humans are ruining its forest. You close your eyes. For now, there's no battle, no orders, no pain, except for all of it. And for one fleeting, fragile moment, you forget where you are. Tomorrow will bring more mud, more marching, possibly a skirmish, probably more blisters. But right now, you are still. You are breathing. And somehow, impossibly, you are still alive. There's war, and then there's siege warfare. The Middle Ages answer to the question, what if fighting were slower, more humiliating, and involved a lot more dysentery? You've just arrived at the walls of a French town. Not a famous one. Just a medium-sized collection of stone, wood, and deeply unimpressed locals. The English command has decided that this particular outpost is critical to the war effort, which mostly means it has a river, some grain stores, and isn't already on fire. You, dear Archer, are now part of the siege party. Spoiler, sieges are not fast. They are, in fact, glorified waiting contests between starving attackers and increasingly paranoid defenders. The first rule of siege warfare? Lower your expectations. If you thought a battle was uncomfortable, try doing nothing for 3 weeks, while occasionally dodging rocks flung from the sky. Day 1. You dig. You're handed a shovel, which is either a noble term for crooked stick or the actual remains of a spade last used during the Norman invasion. Your job is to help dig trenches outside the city. Why? Because standing out in the open with arrows whizzing at your face is bad for morale. You dig until your hands blister, your back cramps, and your soul files a complaint. Dirt gets everywhere, under your nails, in your ears, somehow in your stew. The men beside you dig too. No one talks. What is there to say? You all know how this ends. Hopefully with less gangrene. Day 2. You learn about latrines. Ah, yes. The other trench. The one with consequences. Welcome to the charming reality of medieval sanitation, which is to say, it doesn't exist. There's a pit, a plank, and a deeply unsettling smell that reminds you of your cousin's wedding, the one with the spoiled fish. You take your turn. You do not look down. You do not linger. Then you rejoin the camp, where flies are having the time of their lives. Day 4. The arrows return. You thought things were quiet? Think again. The town's archers have spotted your cheerful little faces poking up from the dirt, and are now sending their own pointy greetings. You dive for cover. Osric takes a hit to the leg. Not serious, just enough to ruin his week and his trousers. You knock your own arrow and fire back, aiming for movement near the parapets. You don't hit anything. You never hit anything. But it's the gesture that counts. This is what most of your days look like now. Waiting. Guarding. Occasionally, shooting arrows at shadows. You ration your bowstring wax. You sleep in armor. You grow a beard just by thinking about it. There's always the sound of something. A rock being dropped, a cough, the creak of a trebuchet being wheeled into position. Oh yes, the trebuchet. Nothing says we're not messing around like a 90-foot medieval catapult that hurls half a tree through the air using physics, fury, and a counterweight made of rocks, and possibly your last shred of hope. You watch as it launches a boulder. It arcs through the air like an angry moon and slams into the town wall with a satisfying thud. You cheer briefly. Then you realize there are 6 more walls. Day 8. Hunger begins to nibble. The food rations are thinning. The hard biscuits are getting harder. One man tries to soften his beer. It doesn't work. Another man finds something unidentifiable in his stew and decides not to ask. You eat in silence, chewing slowly, and trying not to think about where the meat came from. Someone suggests eating a rat. Everyone laughs. No one laughs very long. Historical curiosity pill. In prolonged sieges, armies ran out of food so often that eating rodents, dogs, and, on occasion, leather belts was not uncommon. Which brings us to day 10, when a small argument breaks out over whether boiled boot leather counts as a soup or a stew. You go with soup. Less chewing. Day 12. You meet siege boredom. There's no battle, no attack. Just waiting. Your arrows stay in your quiver, your sword gathers rust, and your joints begin to ache from doing absolutely nothing. Osric starts carving little faces into his arrows. You name yours. One's called Definitely Misses, the other Hope. You try to sleep, but sleep in a siege camp is like privacy, mostly imaginary. There are whispers in the dark, men arguing over dice, someone softly weeping. Somewhere, a cow is mooing. No one knows why. Probably existential dread. Day 15. The smell reaches peak performance. It's not just you. The whole camp smells like a goat married a turnip, and they moved into a compost heap. Clothes haven't been washed. Feet haven't been dried. One man is growing mushrooms in his boots. Another insists it's a sign from God. You decide not to comment. Day 17. Retaliation. The town's defenders have acquired their own trebuchet. You discover this when a large stone obliterates the firewood pile near the camp kitchen. No one is injured, but the stew is now extremely well mixed. You're ordered to fire a volley in retaliation. You stand, you aim, you fire. The arrows bounce off the stone walls like very angry toothpicks. Day 19. Your bowstring snaps. You knew it was coming. It's been fraying for days, and today it finally gave up. You don't blame it. You consider retiring, or running away, or just lying very still and pretending to be a rock. But instead, you pull out your spare string, the one soaked in beeswax and prayers, and restring your bow. Because quitting isn't an option. Because desertion means execution. And because somewhere in that miserable little town, someone is equally tired, equally cold, and equally wishing this siege would end. And on day 21, it does. Not with glory, not with fanfare, just with a quiet white flag raised over the wall. The town surrenders. Its people are starving. Its gates swing open. And you, exhausted, filthy, and barely upright, walk in with your fellow archers, not as heroes, just as survivors. There is no cheering. There is no feast. There's just the promise of rest, and maybe a clean shirt. You lean on your bow, every muscle aching, and think, just for a moment, that maybe, this war will give you a day off. It won't. But you'll take the illusion, just for tonight. So you've survived a siege, multiple battles, trench foot, and soup that may have contained something still moving. Bravo. You're now what medieval society generously refers to as a veteran, a title that comes with exactly 0 perks and a bonus round of back pain. You're heading home. not in triumph, not on horseback, but on foot, dragging everything you own on your back like a particularly depressed pack mule. Your bow is still slung over your shoulder. Your sword, dulled, dented, and now mostly sentimental, taps against your leg with every step. Your boots are so worn they now qualify as decorative socks. The march home is quieter than the march to war. Fewer men, fewer songs, fewer teeth in some cases. No one talks much. You've all seen too much, smelled too much, dug too many holes in places that didn't deserve your suffering. The countryside blurs past. Villages squint at you from behind hedgerows. Children point. One tries to salute. Another throws a rock. You wave either way. You're not sure which reaction is more appropriate. You camp in a field on the third night, wrapped in the same blanket you left with, now more whole than cloth, held together by twine, stubbornness, and the faint memory of what warmth used to feel like. Osric, still alive despite all odds, and a truly spectacular rash, lies beside you chewing on a piece of stale bread. "You going back to the same place?" he asks. You shrug. "If it's still there." "Gee, this is a reasonable answer." Medieval villages had a distressing tendency to vanish between campaigns. Plague, famine, fire, or the local lord's creative ideas about taxation, take your pick. Your childhood home might now be a field, or a ruin, or owned by a guy who says he found it fair and square while you were off being a pincushion for national pride. Eventually, you arrive. It's still standing, which feels like a miracle. The thatch roof looks sadder. The door sags like it gave up years ago, but it's home, or at least the closest approximation. Your mother, older, narrower, but still wielding a wooden spoon with tactical precision, sees you and gasps, then whacks you with the spoon for leaving without saying goodbye. You cry, not because of the spoon, not exactly. You're back. And now, of course, the real struggle begins. Civilian life. You were trained to draw a bow with deadly accuracy, to judge wind, angle, and range, to shoot a knight off a horse before he knew your name. And now you're being asked to dig turnips. You nod. You dig. It's just like digging trenches, only colder, and the turnips are less likely to stab you. You eat dinner quietly, wrapped in your cloak, surrounded by people who still have both ears and all their original optimism. No one understands what you've seen. Not really. They ask if you killed anyone. They ask what the French smell like. One lad wants to know if you've ever met a real knight. You nod vaguely. You tell them the French smelled like onions and fear. You don't talk about Timothy, or the soup, or the time Osric saw a man step on his own arrow and apologize for it. Your bow hangs above the hearth now. A relic. No one else can even draw it. You try, one evening, just for old time's sake, and nearly throw out your shoulder. Some nights you wake up screaming. Other nights you don't sleep at all. You lie there, staring at the rafters, listening to the wind rattle the thatch, and pretending it's not war you're hearing in the silence. And then comes the news. Another campaign. Another call for archers. The king is assembling men again, this time for a siege in the south, or maybe a skirmish in the west. The specifics don't matter. The arrows will still fly. The mud will still cling. The bread will still hurt. You're offered a choice. You can stay. Live out your days as a farmer with aching knees and a 1,000-yard stare. Or you can go back, pick up your bow, strap on your broken boots, and be paid, barely, to repeat everything you just barely survived. You stare at the notice. And because this is what it means to be a medieval archer, you say yes. Not because you love war, not because you crave glory, but because you owe the Lord 2 more years of service. And because, somehow, life as a soldier, dirty, painful, endless, still makes more sense than the quiet terror of peacetime. You string your bow, pack your bag, and march off once more into the mud. Because in the end, you don't last a day as a medieval archer. You last years. And each one takes another little piece of you, until all that's left is a man, a bow, and the ghosts he carries behind his eyes. The third history is why medieval archers had permanent back pain. Imagine being 14 years old and being told, "Congratulations, you're going to be a national asset." What they actually mean is, "Congratulations, you're going to have irreversible spinal damage by age 20 and never be able to lift your arms above your shoulders again." Welcome to the elite, glamorous, bone-grinding world of the medieval English archer. Let's set the scene. It's 1361. You're a boy, because let's be honest, the Crown isn't exactly into equal opportunity employment right now. And you've just had the life-defining misfortune of being born into a yeoman family with functioning limbs. This makes you eligible for military excellence and chronic pain. The king has declared that all males must practice archery every Sunday after church. That's right. Not prayer, not rest, not family dinner. No, it's time to pull a 150-pound war bow until your arms feel like pudding. And if you skip practice, there's a fine, because nothing says divine right of kings like charging people for not injuring themselves. Now, don't picture some cute little Robin Hood toy bow. We're not talking about sport archery. No target shooting here. We're talking about the English longbow, a 2-meter, 6.5-foot slab of yew wood so stiff it laughs at your tendons. Pulling it required a draw weight of 120 to 180 pounds. That's like deadlifting a full-grown pig with one arm repeatedly, while someone shouts at you to aim for the French. Historical curiosity pill. Many war bows were made from yew, a wood prized for its springy heartwood and rigid sapwood combo. But yew was rare and often imported from Spain or Italy, which meant some archers shot with imported pain. So you start training at age 7. That's right, 7. You're handed a miniature longbow and told, stretch, pull, release, repeat. Over the next few years, your body transforms not into a graceful warrior, but into a lopsided muscular experiment. Your left arm swells into something that could bench press your sheep. Your right arm stays suspiciously underdeveloped. Your spine twists. Your collarbones protest. But hey, at least you're not a serf, right? Wrong. You are a serf. Just one with excellent aim and extremely uneven shoulders. By your teenage years, you've built what archaeologists now charmingly refer to as archer's deformity. This delightful condition features twisted shoulder sockets, asymmetrical scapulae, compressed vertebrae, and wrists that scream louder than your instructor when you miss the mark. Skeletal remains from archers at sites like Towton or the Mary Rose, a sunken Tudor warship, show exactly this. People who gave their health to the bow, and in many cases, also their lives. And speaking of lives, here's the kicker. You're not training for fun or future bragging rights at medieval bar trivia night. You're training to fight. England is knee-deep in the 100 Years' War, which, in case you're wondering, is just French for "it never ends." You're a tool in the royal shed to be sharpened, aimed, and fired at whichever duchy needs subduing this week. Now, step into the daily grind of training. You're outside in the muddy commons, pulling and releasing that enormous war bow over and over again, until your fingers go numb and your shoulder feels like it's being gnawed on by a bear. Your instructor, who probably once saw France from a distance and considers himself a veteran, is yelling, "Higher! Stronger! Don't drop your elbow!" Like some medieval CrossFit coach who skipped empathy school. To help with your grip, you rub your fingers raw against the hemp bowstring, which eventually leaves you with lovely little grooves in your fingertips and permanent calluses that could double as armor. Gloves? What gloves? Leather was expensive, and your local lord doesn't care if you get a blister as long as you can still pierce a knight through the nostril. Historical curiosity pill. Archers practiced at butts. No, not that kind. Butts were mounds of earth used as targets. English law required every village to maintain a set of these. Some places still have butts lane or archery field as leftovers from the era when Sunday worship meant prayers, potage, and projectile warfare practice. Now, in the quiet hours after practice, you lie in bed on your straw mat, which smells faintly of goat, and you try not to cry. Your back is in open rebellion. Your neck is permanently tilted slightly to the left. Your shoulder clicks every time you lift a spoon. Congratulations, you're becoming a professional. But don't worry, all this pain has a purpose. In just a few years, you'll be on a battlefield somewhere in northern France, standing in the rain, behind a wall of stakes and mud, watching an endless line of mounted French nobility gallop toward you. Your commander, someone whose armor cost more than your entire village, will yell, "Knock, draw, loose," and you'll send a storm of arrows into the sky. And as those arrows arc downward and punch through plate armor like soggy paper, you'll feel nothing, because you can't feel anything anymore. Your nerves gave up around age 16. Still, you'll win the battle. The English longbow will shape medieval warfare, dethrone the chivalric knight, and change military history forever. You'll just be too sore to enjoy it. And just as you think the worst is over, well, let's just say the king has a few more campaigns in mind. But that's a tale for tomorrow. Let's jump ahead. You've officially made it. You are now a full-grown English longbowman, feared on the battlefield, mildly pitied in the tavern, and deeply loathed by your own spine. It's autumn 1364, and you're standing ankle-deep in wet grass somewhere in Brittany. The sky is weeping, the mud is rising, and your bow is somehow both soaked and splintering. You slept in a ditch last night, which might have been romantic if it hadn't also been your latrine. Your toes are numb, your stomach is empty, and your back feels like it's been used to patch a crumbling wall. Again. Welcome to the glamorous life of the professional archer. Now, let's talk gear. Because if you're going to ruin your body for a living, you might as well look good doing it. Except you don't. Your uniform consists of a faded tunic stiff with dried sweat, leggings that gave up on elasticity in 1359, and shoes so thin they might qualify as foot-shaped suggestions. You might get a leather jerkin if your captain likes you. If he doesn't, enjoy the sensation of rainwater dripping down your spine for the next 6 hours. Your bow, however, is a thing of deadly beauty. Or it was, before it warped in the rain. Made of yew, and taller than you are, it has a draw weight of approximately destroy your rotator cuff. You've trained for years to pull it back in one smooth motion, anchoring the string near your jaw. It takes every ounce of your strength, and some days you wonder if your skeleton is secretly plotting an escape. Historical curiosity pill. The draw weight of medieval war bows could exceed 180 pounds, nearly 3 times the force of modern competition bows. Skeletons of archers found on the Mary Rose show enlarged left arms and deformed spines due to lifelong bow training. Let's take a moment to reflect on your glorious job description. You are a missile-launching meat bag. You shoot up to 12 arrows per minute. That's one every 5 seconds. During battle, your arrows are over a yard long, tipped with bodkin or broadhead steel, and designed to pierce armor or make a grown man cry, respectively. You carry a sheaf of 24, plus another stashed in the dirt like a grim Easter egg hunt. The command is given: knock, draw, loose. You repeat it like a prayer. The string slaps your bracer. The arrow sings through the air, and the collective flight of 1,000 arrows creates that special medieval music. The soft, fluttering hum of impending doom. But the enemy is far away, right? You're just standing still? Letting the bow do the work? Oh no, that would be too reasonable. You have to march. You have to run. And when things get messy, you have to fight hand to hand, which is tricky, considering one arm is now significantly bulkier than the other, and your spine is shaped like a dramatic question mark. Also, you're carrying your bow, a dozen arrows, a dagger, and a staff. And yes, you're expected to carry it all without collapsing into a tragic pile of tendons and regret. Now, let's talk posture. Or more accurately, the complete betrayal of it. Drawing a longbow doesn't involve a polite shrug and a tug. No, you brace yourself like you're preparing to uproot a tree. Your feet are planted, your back muscles scream in harmony, and your shoulder blades threaten to swap places. Do this hundreds of times, day after day, and eventually your body stops asking why and just commits to becoming a lopsided human trebuchet. And here's the best part. There's no rest day. Archers are trained year-round. Rain? Practice. Feast day? Practice. Near death from the flux? Practice. Because if your arms are still attached, you're not trying hard enough. Historical curiosity pill. Some English archers practiced with progressively heavier bows, like medieval bodybuilders. Except their protein shake was barley gruel and salted pork, and their gym was a muddy field behind the local church. Now it's evening. You sit near the fire, if you're lucky enough to have one, and try to massage the feeling back into your shoulders. Your hands are swollen, your knuckles are raw, and your spine is composing angry poetry in Old English. You're handed your rations, a hunk of black bread so tough it could be used as a weapon, and a slosh of weak ale that tastes vaguely of turnip and disappointment. The other archers sit with you, equally broken, equally proud. You swap stories about the last battle, the one before, the one where Tom shot a knight in the eye from 200 yards and swears it was skill, not luck. You laugh. You hurt. You survive. And in the distance, drums beat again. Because war, like your back pain, never takes a day off. Sleep, if you can call it that, comes slowly. You curl up in your cloak, fingers twitching like you're still drawing the bow, and hope tomorrow doesn't involve a cavalry charge. Your dreams are full of arrows, French curses, and the gentle sound of your spine cracking like firewood. You are a medieval archer. You are sore. You are tired. You are irreplaceable. And tomorrow, you'll do it all again. Because no one told your back it could retire. You wake up face down in a puddle. It may have been a pillow once, but time, weather, and a night of your own drooling have transformed it into something best described as compost with aspirations. The ache in your lower back has leveled up from mild medieval discomfort to permanent architectural flaw. One leg is asleep, the other one is insulted. You attempt to stretch, and your spine responds with a noise usually associated with collapsing furniture. Welcome to another glorious day in the life of a medieval longbowman. Let's take a break from the battlefield today and talk about training. Because even when you're not dodging cavalry or threading an arrow through the slit of a charging knight's visor, you're still working. And by working, I mean voluntarily dislocating your own shoulder in the name of national defense. Your lord expects weekly practice, but your sergeant, a man made entirely of angry tendons and bad memories, expects more. He doesn't want you hitting the target. He wants you hitting it with the kind of force that makes it rethink its life choices. And so you train. You draw. You release. You repeat. Over and over. In rain, sleet, mild plagues, and occasional sheep interference. You might be wondering, why not use a lighter bow for training? Ah, yes. That would be sensible. Unfortunately, the medieval military system runs less on logic and more on tradition, superstition, and people who yell a lot. So you practice with the real thing, the full 150-pound longbow, every time. Historical curiosity pill. Longbowmen often trained with increasingly heavier bows, sometimes starting with lower draw weights in youth and graduating to war bows by their teens. Skeletal remains confirm dramatic muscle development, particularly in the back and left shoulder. Basically, if you were left-handed, your left side turned into a medieval bodybuilder, while your right side was just along for the ride. Now let's talk arrows, because your life depends on them, and you've been expected to make your own. Yes, part of your job includes fletching, the fine art of attaching feathers to shafts and pretending you don't have crippling hand cramps. You carve shafts from ash or birch, straighten them painstakingly over heat, then fit the heads. Bodkin points for armor penetration. Broadheads for anyone lucky enough to not own armor. Some arrows are barbed because you're not just aiming to kill. You're aiming to make it extremely difficult for a medieval surgeon. Read, guy with a rusty knife and a religious pamphlet to help anyone. Then there's the fletching itself. Goose feathers, usually. White feathers for the right, gray for the left, black for the rookies who can't tell the difference. Each fletched and glued with a resin that smells like something you wouldn't want to spill on your breeches. And speaking of breeches, let's have a moment of silence for your knees. Kneeling while shooting, crawling for better angles, crouching behind barrels that smell suspiciously of fermented cabbage. None of it is kind to your joints. By the time you're 30, your knees sound like a medieval percussion ensemble. And guess what? You haven't even been paid yet. That's right. Archers were often mercenaries or semi-retained men-at-arms who fought on contract. Your lord or the crown might owe you wages for months, if not years, your promised coin, maybe a plot of land, or, if you're really unlucky, the right to loot, which is basically the legal version of, if you survive, feel free to rob the place. Historical curiosity pill. English archers were sometimes paid a daily wage of 6 pence, 3 times what a regular foot soldier earned. But payments were often late, partial, or entirely missing. Many archers supplemented their income with looting or dying. So now you're broke, sore, and your bowstring just snapped mid-draw, which means you get to spend the rest of your evening twisting linen into cordage and praying it doesn't unravel the moment you next take aim. Still, it's not all miserable. Sometimes you're stationed at a castle, one of the few places with food that hasn't been boiled into gray despair. Sometimes You're given a proper cot. And sometimes, on holidays or victory feasts, you get meat. Not salted pig scrap or boiled bones, but real roast. A chicken leg you didn't have to catch yourself. A crust of bread that wasn't used as a cutting board yesterday. For a brief moment, you feel almost human. And then, your shoulder spasms mid-bite. You drop the leg into the fire, and the moment passes. Before bed, you stretch again, out of habit, out of desperation, and out of vague hope that one day you'll be able to turn your head to the left without hearing a sound like a goose being stepped on. As you lie down on a lumpy bag of straw that insists on stabbing you in 6 different directions, you think of your father. He, too, was an archer. He died with his bow in hand, half buried in the marshes of Crécy. They say he dropped 6 knights in 5 minutes before a crossbow bolt got him. You don't know if it's true, but you like to believe it. It makes the pain feel like inheritance, not punishment. You close your eyes and drift into sleep, dreaming of a land where people fire bows that don't weigh as much as a cow's thigh, and where payment arrives on time. Spoiler: that land doesn't exist. Not for another 700 years. But tomorrow, you'll wake up. You'll stretch. You'll groan. You'll draw your bow. Because that's what longbowmen do. Let's begin with an alarming realization. Your spine has stopped negotiating. It's no longer protesting quietly. It's staging a full rebellion. You've spent over a decade drawing a bow that could double as a battering ram, and your back now feels like it was constructed by a drunken blacksmith who ran out of spare parts. Welcome to the veteran phase of your archer's career. The part where you know all the tricks, have all the scars, and can predict the weather using only the pain in your left shoulder. Today, you're back in England. No battles, no screaming commanders, no French cavalry charging at you like particularly rude furniture. Just peace. And peace, as it turns out, is deeply inconvenient, especially when it gives your body time to reflect on the last 15 years of biomechanical abuse. But of course, peace doesn't mean rest. You're still training the local lads. You've been asked, or more accurately, told, to drill the village boys in case the king needs another 1,000 archers to send overseas. Because if there's one thing monarchs love more than taxes, it's longbowmen with low standards and permanent nerve damage. Historical curiosity pill. After battles like Agincourt, 1415, England's obsession with archery only deepened. Laws were passed requiring all able-bodied men to practice weekly. Even cricket was banned at times, not because it was bad, but because it distracted from the national pastime of creating widespread orthopedic trauma. You stand in the fields, barking orders. "Draw!" you shout, while young Will, age 12, nearly flings himself backward, trying to pull the string. You sigh. You remember being 12 and thinking pain was something only old people experienced. You didn't realize the entry fee to adulthood was your rotator cuff. Let's talk about what drawing a bow for 20 years actually does to a body. Your deltoid muscle, the one at the top of your arm, is enormous. Not statue of a hero, enormous. More like mutant potato with veins, enormous. Your rhomboid muscles, lopsided and angry. Your trapezius looks like it's been sculpted by someone who only read about anatomy from a particularly confusing Bible verse. And your spine? Bent. Warped. A subtle but unmistakable curve from always bracing, always leaning, always twisting. Medieval scholars wouldn't know what scoliosis was, but you're living it. By now, your right hand has a permanent callus across the first 2 fingers. Your fingertips are flattened. Your left forearm, which braces the bow, looks like it belongs to a mason. Meanwhile, your knees crack like firewood, and your neck makes the sound of someone shuffling parchment every time you turn to look at anything. Historical curiosity pill. Modern forensic studies of Archer skeletons from the Mary Rose shipwreck revealed significantly thickened left arm bones and compressed spines, with signs of arthritis, vertebral damage, and even calcified tendons. Essentially, they were walking X-rays of suffering. You try to demonstrate proper form for the boys. You raise the bow, you draw, and your shoulder stings like it's being poked by Satan's knitting needle. But you hold it. You release. The arrow hits the target with a satisfying thunk. The boys cheer. You wince. Later, back in your cottage, which is a generous term for a wooden cube with moss ambitions, you sit by the fire and prepare the evening treatment. This involves several highly scientific methods, including groaning loudly, soaking your arm in a bucket of cold water, and muttering obscenities at a piece of boiled bark you were told might help by someone's grandmother. Your wife suggests you retire. You scoff, mostly to mask the fact that you now grunt every time you stand up. Retire? What would you do? Open a bakery? Teach sheep how to fletch arrows? No, you'll keep going. Because somewhere in your body, perhaps in that one vertebra that hasn't yet collapsed, there's still some fight left. And the truth is, you're proud. Not because of the medals. There aren't any. Not because of the wealth. You have a fine collection of rocks. But because when people look at you, crooked, limping, and occasionally held together by willpower and mud, they see an archer. A survivor of Crécy, Poitiers, and 6 other places you no longer pronounce correctly. Your bow hangs above the hearth. It's warped, worn, and stained with years of sweat, rain, and battle. But to you, it's a sacred thing. A yew wood monument to pain, persistence, and getting things done with one arm bigger than the other. You lay down in your straw bed, joints crackling in protest. Outside, the wind howls gently. Inside, the fire pops and hisses like it's whispering your story. Sleep comes slowly, and when it does, you dream of flight. Not of running or escaping, but of arrows soaring high above muddy fields, slicing through wind and armor, marking history one back-breaking shot at a time. You know your story isn't over yet. Not as long as your bow still hangs above that hearth. Not as long as someone might need to learn how to draw without falling over. Not as long as you can still stand. You wake to the gentle sound of birdsong and something snapping in your lower back. It's your lumbar region again, which now functions less like a supportive structure and more like a decorative suggestion. You've survived another night, wrapped in a woolen blanket that smells like all your past injuries, and a little like cheese. You groan, roll over, and realize 2 things. 1, it's raining again. 2, you have a visitor. The village blacksmith, a man so broad he makes cows look underfed, has arrived with his teenage son. The boy is gawky, nervous, and currently holding your old training bow upside down. The father clears his throat. Reckon it's time he learned proper. Can you show him Master Archer? Master Archer. You resist the urge to laugh, because if you do, you might throw out your spine. Again. Instead, you sit up and nod. Slowly. Stiffly. Like an old wooden door being asked to function as a drawbridge. You shuffle outside with the boy and hand him a practice shaft. He grips it backwards. You sigh the sigh of every old man who's ever been asked to explain something obvious to someone whose elbows still work properly. As the boy fumbles with the bowstring, you watch him, fresh-faced, posture intact, bones still aligned. He asks questions. He's eager. He thinks this will be exciting, romantic even. And you can't blame him. Archers are heroes in the stories now. They speak of Crécy, Poitiers, Agincourt, the rain-soaked victories where English arrows fell like iron rain. They don't mention the ruined rotator cuffs, the spinal deterioration, or how your hand cramps just from peeling a turnip. They don't mention the back pain. They never do. Historical curiosity pill. By the 15th century, the longbow was more than a weapon. It was a symbol of English identity, but its mastery came at a steep physiological cost. Chronic pain, arthritis, and early onset disability were common, making retired archers among the most hunched-over legends of their time. The boy finally nocks an arrow correctly. You nod. Good, you say. Then, without thinking, you reach for your bow, your real one. Your fingers remember it before your brain does. The weight, the angle, the creak of you. You lift it slowly. The bow groans in sympathy. You draw. There it is, that sharp, biting pinch between the shoulder blades. The pain flares, then settles into its usual position, like a moody house guest. You loose. The arrow thuds into the target's edge. Not your best shot, not your worst. You smile through clenched teeth and hand the bow to the boy. It hurts, he says after one pull. You nod. Yes, it does. There's a silence. Rain starts again. Soft, steady, unbothered. You both stand there, soaked in it. The boy looks up at you, waiting for more. You consider what to say. About loyalty, about service, about what this job truly costs. But instead, you just mutter, keep practicing, and hobble back to your hut. That night, you sit beside the fire and stare at your hands. They're knotted and worn, not much left in them. But when you look up at your bow on the wall, crooked as you are, you don't feel regret. Because you were there. You helped turn the tide at battles that now live in ballads. You pierced the sky with arrows that shook history. You endured the cold, the rain, the French cavalry, and worse, the weekly training drills with lads who couldn't tell north from their own elbows. And yes, you paid for it. You paid with your posture, your joints, and your ability to lift anything heavier than a loaf of bread without groaning like a dying badger. But still, you were an English archer, and that meant something. So now, as the fire crackles low and your bed of straw creaks under your aching frame, you close your eyes. The pain is still there. Of course it is. But it's familiar now. Like a friend who won't stop talking, but at least always shows up. You breathe in slowly through your nose, because open-mouthed breathing in a cold hut is a shortcut to medieval pneumonia. You wrap the blanket tighter. You drift. Tomorrow, the boy will come again. Tomorrow, your back will protest. Tomorrow, the bow will rise again. And you, crooked, cracked, and quietly proud, will show him how to draw it. Because some legends don't ride horses or wear crowns. Some just carry a longbow and a little extra lumbar support.